Kinda Funny's doing an old school Patreon pledge drive all August long. If you like the content we've made in 2023, we'd like you to consider supporting us on patreon.com/KindaFunny for the month. Just $10 would get you more than 300 exclusive episodes of shows like Kinda Feudy, Gregway, and more. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you for your support.
This week in PlayStation, we're talking about Janet's top 10 PlayStation games of all time, my top 10 PlayStation games of all time, and your top PlayStation games of all time. We'll have all this and more because this is PS I Love You XOXO. Yo, what's up? I'm Blessing. That's Janet. That's Barrett on the ones and twos. And this is PS I Love You XOXO, your weekly PlayStation podcast that you can watch live on patreon.com/kindafunny or later on podcast services around the globe. Remember, you can use Epic Creator Code KindaFunny on all Epic Store and Epic in-game purchases like Rocket League and Fortnite to help support the channel. To be a part of the show, head to kindafunny.com/PSILY to write in with your questions, PSN messages, and more. And remember, patreon.com/KindaFunny will get you the show ad-free plus a bevy of bonus content. Housekeeping for you. We don't have housekeeping. I should say thank you to our Patreon producers, Jedi Master Deadpool, Delaney Twining, and Logan Delaney. Today we're brought to you by Honey, BetterHelp, and Shady Rays. But let's start with a PSN message from you. Nicole writes in to kindafunny.com/PSILY and says, build your ideal PlayStation. Rule is to pick one thing from each generation: a startup sound, a controller, a system design, a PlayStation exclusive game, and an accessory. Janet Garcia, what is your ideal PlayStation?
Oh man, this is interesting. Okay. Should we each just go through, or should we toss it back and forth for each thing and make a one?
I mean, I think I can probably go through if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Right?
Fine. I'll go through. I'll go through two then. I'll just go through.
Because I think for me, do you want to go first?
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay, my ideal PlayStation. I feel like this is the scene from The Office where Michael Scott is thinking of a new god, and he's like the head of a lion, the body of a meerkat, or whatever the fuck he ends up saying. God, design. When I think about what looks the best, okay, it's gonna have the look of the PS1, which I don't know how that'll work because no one cares about discs anymore. But it's gonna have the look of the PS1. I think it's the best looking one. I like the look of it a lot. It will have the startup sound of the PS2 because that is where my PlayStation nostalgia sits the most heavily.
You're talking about like the intro, right? Where you're like overlooking the blocks. That sound?
Well, like when you turn it on and it goes like.
Wait, is that the size? Is that like the? Because for me, I characterize it more as like a, almost like a.
Like a. I don't know. It's like a swoosh, right? Like, am I?
You're talking about when the logo pops up.
That sound.
This right here.
Yeah.
Okay, no, this is what I'm talking about too.
Barrett, thank you for saving my life right now because I'm like, look, I don't know how to describe this. That's the sound. The controller will be the DualSense that we have now. The system design I went over. The exclusive game is, I guess, of existing games, I guess is Jak and Daxter, and the accessory is. This is tough. The accessories have been kind of awkward. Oh man, the PlayStation VR light gun thing.
Oh, okay. And
even though it's a little bit cheating because you're putting the wands inside of it, but I don't know.
I was gonna say, are you using that for Jak and Daxter? What's the wand for? Are you a big fan of the light gun?
I like when I think of accessories, like there's not a lot that I've dived into. Like I wasn't using like the PSI toy thing. Like I didn't really like live in that moment. The fucking wands were very like bootleg Wii VR, but I feel like a gun, like it's always fun to have a toy gun for video games, even if it is kitschy and like only used once. So no, you wouldn't necessarily use it for Jak and Daxter, but you could use it for that mini game where you shoot the muffins at like the swamp rats. But I don't think you need to do that. But if I had to like put it in there, we could find a use for it. So yeah, chat says PSVR 2 for the accessory. I feel like PSVR 2 is more of like a platform than an accessory, even though you cannot use it without it. Like, to me, it's a cop-out accessory a little bit. That's why I stayed away from it. What about you, Bless?
The
What is
access-
your Franken PlayStation?
The accessory part is
Frankenfiction?
the thing that gets me, because ideally I would love to pick a PlayStation 5 accessory, but I think I would desire the PS5 controller more than picking a PS5 accessory, because like I think a Project Q would be dope, but I want the DualSense. And so for controller, I'm picking the DualSense for PS5. For startup sound, I'm with you. I think the PS2 has the best one. I really like that intro sound and the animation, so I'm going with that. For system design, I assume for that we're talking about the physical system.
Yeah. Also, really quick, I messed up because it's supposed to be per generation. So for exclusive, I'll go Last of Us.
Okay. That's the same one I'm going for.
I can't go on 2 twice.
For exclusive, I'm also going Last of Us for PS3. I guess for system design, I'm going PS4 because that's my favorite looking PlayStation. Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's my favorite looking PlayStation.
The slanted slab.
And then I think I've done everything except for PS1. And so for accessory, I'll go with a PS1 memory card.
I had a feeling. Yeah,
just for the
like
nostalgia
that.
of it.
I like that.
Yeah, I miss the memory card. I mean, thank God we've moved beyond it. But when I see my PS2 memory card, whenever I open up my case for NBA Street Volume 2, and I see it right in there, I'm like, oh man, good times with this thing. All 8 megabytes of it. Shout out to the PS1 and PS2 memory cards.
Hell yeah, that's a good one. That's a fun one. I'm surprised they haven't made a. I guess I get it from like a sizing perspective, but made like an external drive that's just at least aesthetically shaped like it, where it has like a USB to like put it in, but like a shell of a card.
See, yeah, that would be the way to do it.
Nostalgia play.
Yeah, have like a USB that slides out of a PS2 memory card that just is the case for it.
You know what? Actually, I kind of have that. Hold on, I have. Which one is it in? I think it's in all of them. I'm trying not to leave my mic too far away.
Janet's shelf is just limitless, Bless.
Yeah, Janet reaches into a shelf and it's like she's reaching into a portal and grabbing whatever
this is
she
what
wants
I
to
mean.
realize. Oh my!
Where
That's exactly what we're talking about.
For the audio listeners,
Janet has Fairly Odd Parents. Because how are you gonna say, man, I wish they had this thing, and then reach over and you have that thing?
And it has the Naughty Dog paw print on the back. Because this is from the limited run games Jack and Daxter like collector's editions that I have, and they gave you like a little USB like memory stick that is shaped like you slide it out, but the rest of it looks like a memory card, 16 gigabyte memory card.
That's awesome.
So I've never used it because what am I using this for? What holds like 16 gigs is not enough to do the things I usually need to do with a USB, like get gameplay footage.
Oh, you mean transferring documents?
From where? Blast, I work at home. From my desktop to my laptop?
Yeah, I was gonna say from your laptop to your desktop in case you have like a Word file that you gotta move somewhere, or PDF
I have been needing to use it.
or a small JPEG. You don't know.
But yeah, I have everything back here.
Janet, we got no time to waste on this episode because it's time for topic of the show. Greg's gone. It's just me and you. And so I decided, why not do a fun, laid-back topic? Our top 10 PlayStation games of all time, Janet. Mm-hmm. We've made both of our rankings. We're gonna go through both of our rankings, starting at number 10. This was an interesting one to bring forth because I messaged this to you the other day on the PS Love You Slack channel. We're both into it. We're like, all right, cool, yeah, that's fun, let's do it. And then I put out a poll, or not even a poll, I put out the question bucket to the audience because I wrote in there, hey, tell us what your top 3 PlayStation games of all time are. And as I read through some of these submissions, I was pretty, not surprised, but I guess enlightened by the way that our audience translated top PlayStation games. Because for me, in thinking about this topic and thinking about this question, I was like, okay, I'm just going to make it my top 10 games of all time that are on PlayStation. And in doing that, I was going through certain games that weren't exclusives. I was going through third parties, multi-platform games, all these other things, but I was reading through all the write-ins. All the write-ins were either PlayStation exclusive or some games that are very specific to PlayStation in some way, have some sort of PlayStation link or connection. To which I went on Twitter and asked people, I was like, hey, if I said we're doing a topic, the top 10 PlayStation
Twitter?
games of all time, I went to Twitter to ask the question.
No, I mean,
what's Twitter?
You don't mean.
Oh,
you don't mean
sorry. X. I went to.
X marks the spot, as they say.
I went to x.com, which sounds like I'm going to a porn website, but I went to x.com to ask the question. And people were like, well, when you say top 10 PlayStation games of all time, we expect exclusives. We expect these sort of things. And so I went back. I changed my personal list right before the show to line up with what people are expecting. But for you, like, was that the same thought process you had? Were you already going into it with exclusives in mind?
Pretty much. I mean, I definitely feel like there's space to be had for just a game on PlayStation, because especially the further we get into our modern era, the somewhat harder it is to have that console v console conversation in a sense, because a lot of things are multi-platform. And I think when we think of some of the best games ever and some of our favorite experiences on PlayStation, those still might be multi-platform games. So I definitely was open to the idea of leaving it more free form, but I do like sticking to either more exclusive at the time, or very, very heavily associated, because otherwise you end up in these weird spots, like when I was first drafting the list, where I was like, well, Portal 2 was on PlayStation, and then I'm like, well, that's like the best game ever made. So like, what am I going to make a list of best PlayStation games? And it's like number 1, Portal 2, number 2, that was my GTA 5. Like, you know,
I had Portal 2 on my list. I had Overwatch on my list. I had GTA San Andreas on my list. And as I was going through again, looking at my list, I was like, well, these are what I consider to be some of the best games of all time on PlayStation. And I started to realize that we kind of put ourselves into a conundrum on this show, right? Because we're a PlayStation podcast. And so like theoretically people could be like, well, why don't you just do the top games of all time? Well, what if I think some of those are Nintendo games? You don't want to hear me talk about that on a PlayStation podcast. But I also can't name it top 10 games that also happen to be on PlayStation, because this is a PlayStation podcast, so we don't want to talk about other like that. They were getting too wordy of a headline there, right? And so we go with top 10 PlayStation games, and when you say that, people expect exclusives, and so I think both of us now are bringing exclusives and PlayStation associated games to the table. And I guess right now we're gonna start with number 10. Do you want to go first, or should I go first? How you feeling, Janet?
You should go first, because I went first for the question of the Franken station. But then after that, like we're going back and forth.
We're going back and forth, right? So I'm going to do 10. You're going to do your number 10, and I'm going to go for some audience write-ins and hear what some of your top 3 video games are.
I think you kick it off. Also, this would be a dumber idea, but it would be funny if you did 10, I did 9, and we just have to randomly skip one of them.
So we just have like a fucked up, because surely our lists are going to have some of the same games on there, and so we're going to be like, number 9, Uncharted, number 8, Uncharted, and well, it's on the list twice now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's go for it.
Now, Bear, is Janet frozen for you?
Yes, our Ethernet port, I think, has disconnected, so I gotta fix that.
People can still hear us, though. Yes.
Yeah, they can still hear you. The chat can no longer hear you, but we're still recording.
We're still going.
So
I mean, we can still keep going like this.
Yeah.
Janet, you're frozen on a wonderful frame, just so you know.
I know. That's honestly exactly how I feel, and I feel like you're frozen pretty well too. Like you don't look.
Oh, am I frozen also?
Yeah, you're frozen for me now too.
Oh,
yeah, because the computer we're streaming to her, has also lost connection. Yeah. So, hopefully this will be fixed in the next 30 seconds.
Honestly,
this also means that I can't show any B-roll or anything for number 10.
Well, can you describe how I look on my frozen face? Am I unfrozen now? Because I can see Janet.
Oh, you just unfroze. I will Slack it to you, because like this absolutely needs to be a new meme format, because it's actually really good. But you can kick it off with your number 10, and I'll go.
All right, so kicking off, I actually want to start off with some ground rules that I made for my list. Of course, like we just mentioned, games are either exclusive or associated with PlayStation in some way. And then the other rule that I implemented on my personal list is that I'm only going one game per franchise. That way I can make room for more franchise inclusions, and I didn't want to do the boring thing of like...
I did the same thing.
Yeah, because like, I don't know, there's some games where it's like, you get it, all right? You know that I like these franchises. We don't need to talk about every Metal Gear game. Like, we don't need to talk about
Uncharted 4.
Yeah, my list doesn't just need to be Metal Gear, God of War, Last of Us. You know, like, let me get some more variety in here. And so I'm going with one game per franchise. With that, because I changed my list before the show to be more exclusive-y, I do want to give some honorable mention shout-outs, Janet. So shout out to Elden Ring. That was going to be on my list.
Wait. No, see, you should do that. No. You already fucked it up. You should do that at the end, because now I know it's not on there. You know what I mean? Like, you're like,
yeah, but these are PlayStation games, so like they're not on there regardless.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So shout out Elden Ring, shout out Fallout 3, shout out Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Overwatch, and Portal 2. That's all I want to give.
Okay.
I'm not gonna stay on them. I'm not gonna talk about them forever. I just want to give them love, because they would have possibly been on my list if I was going by the third-party multi-platform thing. But my actual number 10 is Ghost of Tsushima. It is I was going to say a recent entry, but this game is actually 3 years old now. But it's one that I include for multiple reasons. One, of course, I really love the single player open world. I thought they did such a good job with story. This is one of the most visually stimulating, visually interesting games I've ever played. It is gorgeous. I've never used photo mode more in any game than this one. The combat system, I think, is inspired and really fun. And yeah, like I think just from an overall how to make an open world action, if you want to call it an RPG or like an open world action game, right? I think they went about it in all the right ways. For me, that alone makes it special enough. But on top of that, they have Ghost of Tsushima Legends, which they added a few months after the original release of the game, right? And where I really dug and really loved Ghost of Tsushima proper, Legends is what took the game and really went above and beyond to where that mode alone plays better than a lot of games as a service, loot shooter or loot slashing type games, right? Where you are going in with a co-op team of friends, you are unlocking gear, you are picking a class, you are playing your role, and you eventually get to the raid. And the raid is such a detailed, well-crafted experience that I will forever remember as a moment in a video game for me. Like, I had so much fun playing Ghost of Tsushima Legends, and this mode for me also highlighted just how good a lot of the combat systems are in this game and how interesting and unique it is. And so Ghost of Tsushima Legends is mine, or Ghost of Tsushima proper is my number 10 game for my top 10 best PlayStation games.
Nice. Yeah, that's one that crossed my mind as well. Should I just go straight into my next one? Like,
you can, yeah.
Like, okay, you know what? And now that brings us perfectly to my number 10 game on this list. We have none other than Horizon Forbidden West.
Oh.
As far as single player open world games, this is I started writing down what you were saying because literally I could say the same thing for Horizon Forbidden West. This kind of sits in the same slot with me as Ghost. I think they're great companion pieces that we inadvertently made for each other, because Ghost definitely crossed my mind as, in my opinion, I think Ghost and Horizon Forbidden West are around the same caliber of game.
Yeah.
I think you can
they're
easily
like
debate
sibling
one.
video games almost.
Yes. Like, it is very easy. If you said Ghost is better than Horizon, I wouldn't be too mad. Like, maybe I disagree, but I wouldn't be mad about it. And if you said the inverse, same deal. Maybe I even disagree if I think about it, but I wouldn't be mad about it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is Ghost on your list? Horizon's not on my list.
Because I feel like they occupy kind of the same thing, right? It's a cool open world game. I do think Ghost is a bit more, serious, obviously, in its storytelling than Horizon is, where Horizon's very, like, sci-fi, a little over the top, but I feel like we're drawn to them for the same reasons, right? Because, again, the same things you said I can say about Horizon, where it has this fantastic action combat, the RPG system is simple yet satisfying, it has incredible vistas and looks. I think they both kind of fulfill the single-player open-world adventure that PlayStation has kind of forced for itself in recent history and done really well. And yeah, that's kind of why it sits there for me. I have to put it at 10 because as much as I love Horizon, I do think it is, again, more of an 8, maybe a 9 game, you know? And I think Ghost is kind of similar. So it's not too surprising that we each kind of slotted them at the bottom of our list.
Yeah,
despite, I think, having a lot of reverence for
it's
them.
funny because, like, Horizon, for me, was fighting for the number 10 spot as well. And it came down between Horizon and Ghost of Tsushima. And I think I just went with Ghost of Tsushima because it hit for me a bit more. And I think Legends really is the thing that pushed above and beyond. Like, if it didn't have Legends, I could see myself going with Horizon over it. But I think just for how much of a full package and above and beyond of a package it is with its content, I had to go Ghost. But Horizon is, like, right there.
It so fits our taste, I think, as players. We're such a more traditionalist, skilled combat, hand-to-hand, parry.
Yeah.
Like, that
I
is
like
so
a good
your
melee
bag.
combat game so much.
Exactly. Like, that's so your bag. While I think I am a stand behind this rock for 2 hours and slowly throw traps down, And not that we don't each appreciate those facets in video games, ourselves, but I think we engage with them differently. And I think we're drawn to them in different ways. I'm sure I think if we watched each of us play each of those games, we would play them very differently, despite them being the same games. And I think, Horizon and Ghost, respectively, speaks a little bit more to each of our sensibilities.
For sure, I feel that. Of course, I asked the audience to write in with your top 3 PlayStation games of all time, and I got so many write-ins, Janet. Like, I have about maybe around 27 write-ins on this document, and I barely scratched the surface of the amount of write-ins that I got in the Google form itself. And so shout out to everybody for writing in. People like Mara Camille, who writes in and says, Bloodborne, Final Fantasy 16 and The Last of Us Part 2. A nice little recent entry in there with Final Fantasy 16.
Okay.
Yeah, look at that. Mr. Hawks 182 writes in and says, my top 3 PlayStation games are the games I'll never forget playing for the first time, and games that really ignited my love for video games. In release order, we got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, God of War, and Kingdom Hearts 2. Hell yeah.
Nice.
You're playing Kingdom Hearts 2. No, you're playing 1. And you're eventually going to get to 2.
I think I am going to get to 2.
Oh,
I don't want to,
okay.
we'll get into it a little bit more for like what we've been playing. Cause like I've been playing Kingdom Hearts, you know, like, but, so I'll save more of my thoughts on that later. Cause you know, the further I get in, the more like, I don't know. It's a weird relationship in Kingdom Hearts, but
Fair enough.
It's funny cause I was making this list too. And I, you know, to Mr. Hawks' credit, like I was like, oh, what's going to be at the bottom? Like, what do I want to like kind of barely get in there? And he's like, you could put Kingdom Hearts. I was like, it's too soon, even though the game's old as fuck, but like I just started playing it. So.
And then Josh writes in and says, I assume this is in order. You had at number 1, Persona 3 FES, at number 2, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and then at number 3, Spider-Man 2018.
Yeah. Persona's one that I definitely like, I wish I could put on my list, but since I haven't played it, it doesn't make sense for me to be like, yeah, this is a great game.
Jane, let's get into our number 9s. My number 9, Marvel Spider-Man 2018. For me, this is almost like the... If we're gonna call Horizon and Ghost of Tsushima siblings, I feel like Marvel Spider-Man is like the older sibling. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, okay, like Horizon and Ghost of Tsushima are really holding down the fort for what open world PlayStation games look like, but Spider-Man is doing it on a level that I think is just gonna hit people harder because it's Spider-Man, and they have something special with what New York is, with who Peter Parker is as a character and how engaging the story is, but then even more so how inherently fun the gameplay of Spider-Man and that Insomniac style gameplay is, right? With the swinging through New York and the combat and all that stuff, right? Like, it is such a good time. It is such a dream Spider-Man game. And for me, I'm somebody who I played Spider-Man games all throughout my life, right? Starting off as a kid playing the PS1 Spider-Man 1 game, but then hopping over to PS2 and getting my hands on the Spider-Man movie games, playing both Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 for PS2 and Spider-Man 3, regrettably. But Spider-Man 2 on PS2 was the one that like blew me away and showed me what an open world game could be. I played the hell out of Spider-Man 2 before I even got my hands on a GTA. And playing through that game and swinging through that version of New York and fighting crime and really getting into the role of me being Spider-Man felt so special. And Spider-Man 2018 took that and flew away with it, right? Where it is, hey, here's that same kind of experience, but we're taking everything that worked for Spider-Man 2 and really polishing it and giving it that Insomniac touch. Swinging has never felt better than this. New York has never looked better than this. The story and what they do with the relationship between Peter Parker and Doc Ock is so well done, and I think they do the prime Spider-Man thing, which is they build that relationship between Peter and Dr. Octavius and make it a thing that you care about and flip it on its head in a way that punches you in the gut, even though you know and understand that Doc Ock is supposed to be evil and he's going to be evil. The way that they do that in this game for me is so well done. And so that is for me going to be my number 9.
Fair enough. I mean, it's a great game.
Yeah. Jana, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is a game that KindaFunny may be familiar with. It's Final Fantasy 7 Remake.
Oh.
Which this one surprised even me that it's on here.
Yeah, this surprises me a bit.
Yeah, I know, right? Right? Like, people can change. No, okay, here's the thing. From the jump when I played this, I was like, this combat fucking slaps. And I'm like, this story is there, you know? Like, and I know it's a hot take and people will get upset by it. But again, you have to understand this is my first Final Fantasy game, 7 Remake. When you get thrown in, it's a different experience, you know, than having the nostalgia, the history, seeing Aerith and knowing the way of that moment versus I'm like, I just see a girl in the street selling flowers. Like, I don't know who this girl is, you know, but I have to acknowledge just how good that combat is. It's combat that I still think about. I feel like it, as someone that doesn't play a lot of that style of RPG, it was sort of, you know, a little bit more foreign to me than it would be to other players, and yet it's still stuck really heavily. It still feels like the pinnacle. I think since playing 7 Remake, I've played a lot more, you know, of that kind of action RPG genre, and I keep kind of wanting every game to have this combat system of it being real time, but kind of being able to cheese that with like the menu and slow things down and select everything going on, having highly competent party members, the fidelity of it, the wonkiness of the areas. You can fight a big ass bird in this game. Like there's a lot of
You can fight a house.
Yeah, you do fight a house.
Yeah.
Not even you can't fight because the bird is in one of the fucking VR mission optional things or whatever. This is also a game I spent like the last couple things I want to mention it. This is also a game I spent a lot of time in. So like I think sometimes when you are critical of something that's really beloved, people are like, well, you just don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And to a degree, that's a little true because I'm a newcomer to the franchise. But I spent a lot of time in this because I worked on the guide. And my job was side quests. And when you have the job of side quests, you have to do the main quest and all the side quests to unlock the side quest. You can't just do the side quests. So I did almost every single side quest in this game. I've seen so many parts of it. And with that, I definitely have gained an edge to how I talk about it, but I also have a deep appreciation for it because I've been living in it for a long time. And yeah, this is one of the best. And I kind of wanted something that I want a little bit of diversity of genre too. And again, as much as the story I was not into at all in this, for the most part, the combat hits hard as fuck.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm still thinking about it now, and I'll be thinking about it until the next one comes out.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII Remake is such a special one, right? And I'm right there with you on how fun the combat is, but I'm also somebody where the story worked on me. And as I was playing through that game, I couldn't stop thinking about how this feels like I'm playing a Last of Us again, just in terms of how much I am into this story and into this world. I bought into this experience, and I am into like even things as simple as the facial animation. Like the reference I make all the time with Final Fantasy VII Remake is the scene where Barrett, not our Barrett, but the in-game Barrett, is looking for his daughter, and he has this level of, oh God, our Barrett's doing the same
exactly
thing.
what it looks like.
Where is she? Where is she? But there's this level of like emotion that is conveyed in his face and in his eyes that is unlike anything I've ever seen in a video game. And I think about it all the time of, wow, they really made me feel for this character that on his surface is so tough and has this level of like, you know, I'm a fucking mercenary. Like I am here as like, I'm basically a terrorist. Like that's who Barrett is, right? But he's coming in and he has this good motivation. He's trying to save the planet because the planet is dying, Janet. Like he is trying to do his thing, do what he believes is right to save the world. And he is part of this crew that, you know, is being seen as, oh, you guys are the bad guys. Like you guys are doing this bad thing. You guys are terrorizing the world. But at his core, he is just this man who has so much emotion and love for the people around him. And for me, that was the thing that really cemented how much I adored what this game was doing on a character level and a story level. And yeah, on the gameplay level, man, there's so much to talk about there. But yeah, I'm right there with you that this game is incredible. Janet, going back to some of the audience write-ins, Nicholas Langston writes in and says, God of War 2018, Bloodborne, and Ghost of Tsushima for his top 3 PlayStation games. CJ Splitson writes in and says, Last of Us Part 2, Astrobot Rescue Mission, and Bloodborne. And then Dear Sixlet writes in and says, gives 2 different lists, right? They give a first-party exclusive and a third-party inclusive list. So for a first-party exclusive, they say Dark Cloud, Infamous 2, and Astro's Playroom. And then for a third-party, they give Kingdom Hearts 2, Persona 5, and then Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. But I love to see some Astrobot love in here. I love that we're getting multiple people writing with Astrobot because that's one that I was afraid would get forgotten in some of these write-ins.
I mean, you could, well, I guess for the write-ins, yeah. I'm like, you could make it not forgotten by putting it on your list, Blessing. You know, you do have that option.
Listen, all right, maybe my list is chock full of excellent games that may or may not be as excellent or more excellent than Astrobot. I don't know.
I know. That's the hard thing, too. Ranking these are really hard. But we can talk about the ranking maybe at the end of the retrospective of the 20 minutes that we're talking.
The tough thing here, too, is that when I was getting into these lists, especially with my, I'm only going to include one game per franchise, is I'm just ranking 10s and 9s now. Like all the games that I have on my list, I'll give either a 9 or a 10. And so now I'm like, all right, what 10 is more 10? You know, like what game is a 10er? Like what's the most 10 out of 10 game here, which is always tough. But getting into our number 8s, Janet, my number 8 is God of War Ragnarok.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
And
I'm thinking, how high is the rest of this list? But go on.
Well, this follows up what I'm saying in terms of ranking 10s. Because as I'm scrolling down, the rest of these games that I have on my list are games that I'll give 10 out of 10s.
I feel like I have whacker games than you then maybe, but go ahead.
You gotta play more PlayStation games, Shannon. Right?
I know. That's what people have been telling me a lot in the comments that I don't read.
So God of War Ragnarok, of course, is one that I mean, I really don't have to go deep into describing it, right? We all just played it late last fall, but I have it in here above the original God of War 2018, just because I think this game did such a fantastic job of amping things up, making this story and world feel bigger, finding ways to explore more characters and making all those character moments matter. But also, I think this game is just a masterclass of moment to moment keeping you engaged in what's happening in the story, right? Even when you're in the middle of a combat encounter, you still have this feeling of, oh, but what happens next? Like, where are we going here? Or where am I going with this character? What's happening? The world is so well defined. The dialogue between characters is so well done, and in so many moments unexpectedly emotional, especially when you talk about the character of Kratos and some of the character development that he goes through. So well done. The only thing that like keeps God of War Ragnarok still like not at the peak for me is that for whatever reason, God of War combat never all the way sticks with me, right? Like I have a fun time with the combat, but there's so many other games where I prefer their combat system over how it feels to play God of War Ragnarok. And I don't know if that's the thing that I'll ever get over with what current God of War is. I think it just has a specific feel that isn't all the time for me. But even with that, right, still a game that I would say is a masterpiece that knocks it out of the park at so many levels. And so for me, yeah, that's why it's my number 8. Janet, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is Astrobot Rescue Mission, because we
Let's
don't forget
go.
about our rich cultural history here. PSVR 1, boom, there it is. I love Astrobot Rescue Mission. I mean, this is, even though the system didn't sell that well, this was the system seller. You know, if you bought it, this was something you played. This is part of the shared PSVR 1 experience. But genuinely, I mean, this is like one of the best platformers in modern history.
Yes.
Like, period. PlayStation, Nintendo, anybody. And all I want is for them to make a game that isn't on such a niche platform. Because again, a lot of people listening probably never played this game, but I guarantee you, if you're listening to the show, you've heard from us, from many people, from everywhere about how good this game is. Such a creative, genuine use of the PSVR platform in terms of having kind of that, you sort of have that godlike perspective, almost like a Moss kind of setup where you're controlling, you know, at the little Astrobot guy, and then you kind of also interact with the world around you. There's some fun stuff with like the controller, you know, shooting water to blow stuff up, changing the environment. It feels so genuinely traditional in terms of kind of mascot platformery vibes, while also being incredibly fresh, having a movement that feels like you're being taken on an adventure. This is a game that I think is defined by the ways that it surprises and delights you over and over again, while also feeling like so familiar. If if you're used to the genre, you've played, boss battles like this, you've jumped over rings, you've done these things, but it's kind of recontextualizing them in a way that you've never quite experienced before. There's a part of this game, and I wish I had the tweets or the Zed or whatever the fuck they're calling it now. I wish I had it on my mind or saved already, or I looked it up before. But quite literally, there is a world in this game that I thought was so beautiful. I was almost moved to tears with how good it looked. And when I tweeted that out, someone responded and was like, "Was it this?" And I'm like, "No, it was somewhere else." And that's how good looking that game is. So yeah, that is an absolute like banger for me. Definitely in the pantheon of best PlayStation games. And also, I think, whether or not you think it's like, deserving of that number 8 slot, I do think that we can all kind of acknowledge that Astrobot Rescue Mission sits in an important spot in PlayStation culture and history, while also being a quality video game, which is why I really want to have it on my list to sort of represent, like, when I think about who I am as a PlayStation player, Astrobot is one of those core games.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with everything you just said, but even talking about those wow moments. And for me, the one I always think of is there's a level where you go underwater, and Jana, that my microphone is always recording whenever I'm playing a video game. And there's a moment where I dip underwater, like your camera goes underwater, and I remember being like, I had a gasp of like, oh my God, what's happening? And I went back and watched it and listened to it, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me, man? Like, this is immersive. But it was so immersive. Like, I felt that shit when I went underwater. There's another moment where you're elevating into the sky, and it felt really cool, right? Like, Astrobot, I think, gets that right about being a 3D platformer. And if you know me, you also know that I'm a hater when it comes to Crash Bandicoot. Like, I'm always talking shit about Crash Bandicoot. For me, Astrobot is what Astrobot is what Crash Bandicoot should be, right? It is this magic.
Oh, because of the spin?
Wait, say that again?
Because of the spin?
Not even because it's just for the level design, right? Because it's these linear levels that are similar to Crash Bandicoot. I mean,
PlayStation loves to spin.
PlayStation loves, of course.
Mascots, like everyone's spinning.
Give Joel a spin in the next Last of Us.
Honestly, okay.
I guess Ellie, give Ellie a spin.
A dumb fucking like April Fool's free game. Last of Us the platformer. I would fucking play it. Like I would. Play it.
For sure. That's gonna be out soon as a mobile game. I'm pretty sure. But no, like the linear level design, right? Because that's one of the things that I've always faulted Crash on. Is I'm for a 3D platformer. I love more of the open explorative stuff. That's why I've always preferred something like Spyro than to Crash. Crash being these 2D, essentially 2D, 3D levels, right? Where you're going through this corridor and like if your depth perception is at all off, you're just fucking up these jumps and all this shit, right? Astrobot has that same Astrobot Rescue Mission in particular has that same sort of level design of you are going on one path, right? But with the way in which the levels are constructed and like the way they hide certain collectibles and use your perspective in VR, it's so smartly done. And the level design alone elevates it to this whole new level of, oh, okay, I can enjoy this kind of platformer. It just has to be really well constructed and designed. And that's the thing that Astrobot brings to the table for me. And yeah, I think for your point about where it stands in the PlayStation ecosystem, you're 100% right. It is an important PlayStation game, and it is, for me, undisputably the best PlayStation VR game from PlayStation, right? First party PlayStation VR game. Janet, hopping back into some of the audience write-ins again, I asked you guys to write in with your top 3 PlayStation games. Xander218 wrote into kindafunny.com/PSILY and says, Uncharted 3, because it, in my opinion, is the best and most Uncharted-like Uncharted game there is. Spider-Man 2018, because it finally felt perfect to control my favorite hero, and God of War Ragnarok, because it genuinely felt, it's genuinely one of the best games of all time. That's all. Brittany Taylor writes in and says, in no particular order, and chosen based mostly on nostalgia, sentimental value, gameplay, and story, but also based on how I'm feeling at this particular moment.
That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of particularly based ons.
Caveats.
At number 1, Kingdom Hearts 2. At number 2, Soul Blade / Soul Calibur. And then number 3, Last of Us Part 2. Shout out Brittany. That's I love the inclusion of Soul Calibur in there. And then Brian Barnett says, Final Fantasy Tactics, Bloodborne, and Final Fantasy X.
I gotta play Tactics because Isaiah brought up Tactics too, and I was like going over my list with him. It's like if you played that, that would probably be on your list because it's really good.
Dude, everybody who I know who's played Final Fantasy Tactics loves Final Fantasy Tactics, and it makes me hope that it gets a 2D HD remake from Square because that's the way I'll play it. Like I feel like that'll happen eventually if I hold my breath long enough. My number 7, Nier Automata. This is one where, you know, 20, a lot of people are talking about 2023 as being the best year of gaming, if not one of the best years of gaming. And for me, whenever I look back at 2017, that's what that has been for me. And one of my main arguments is Nier Automata and what this game brought to me as, you know, I'm somebody who loves action. I'm somebody who loves a good RPG. And I'm also somebody who likes post-apocalypse, but also I like stories being told in interesting ways in video games, right? Like I like video games exploring how to tell stories that only video games can. And Nier Automata gives all of that to me in peak form, where the action, of course, is Platinum Games. They're the kings of stylish action, right? Like they know how to do that shit. And playing the game and having it be this combination of a hack and slash, but then also having these shoot 'em up elements that keep you on your toes and gives you these different ways to engage in the action. So fun. The character work between 2B, 9S, and all the other characters in the game, so well done. And like the further you get into what this game does with its different like playthrough quote unquote systems, its different endings, I think it's so smart. And again, only tells a story in a video game the way that only a video game can, right? By making re-experience these events in the eyes of different characters by playing as these different characters. I think all that stuff is so well done. But then I talk about the soundtrack, which is for me my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. Like Nier Automata for me does it all, and it's a special game. And for me on my list, I'll refer to it as like the most underrated. It's one that I wish I saw on more top 10 lists. I know a lot of people who love Nier Automata fucking love Nier Automata, but yeah, like I'm all about it. And so that's my number 7. Janet, what about you?
My number 7 is it's not as good of a game as your number 7 probably, but I'm gonna go with none other than
Patapon.
Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal.
Oh, I like this
Again,
pick a lot.
more surprises. I know y'all may know me on here as the Ratchet and Clank hater because I am a little bit tired of the formula. But before I was tired of the formula, I was all in on the fucking formula. And I think Up Your Arsenal, back when they were still naming everything off of a gross pun, was a lot of people think of this as like it's when they had like great single player and they had this multiplayer option, which you kind of see a little bit in this footage that Barrett has pulled up. I didn't do any of the multiplayer stuff, like the online stuff. For me, this just kind of hits the pinnacle of like a franchise hitting its stride to me. This is, I believe, the 3rd installment in the Ratchet and Clank series. And it just kind of was like, they get it, they continue to evolve, and they're still doing it and still keeping it fresh. And that's kind of why I like when I was making this list, the first thing I thought of was I want one of the old Ratchet and Clank games. And the only question was which one I wanted to pick from that beginning era. Again, since then, I think time has gone on a long time, and it is hard to continue to innovate without changing the core of what it is. Yeah, which is a tough spot for anybody to be at. But yeah, this is back when everything still hit, everything was exciting.
Everything was so fresh.
I didn't have a job yet. This was a good time.
Hell yeah. Yeah, no, like when I think of Ratchet and Clank, especially the early ones, I get brought back to that PS2 era. And for me, Ratchet and Clank was the platformer that won out for me in that PS2 era, because I felt like you're either a Ratchet and Clank person or you're a Jack and Daxter person, or maybe you're a Sly Cooper person. If you're unlucky, you're attacking the Power of Juju person. But like Ratchet was the king of it all, right? When you're talking about
cool.
the PS2. Or if you're cool, secretly I was a tech person.
You're like the ahead of its time hipster kind of thing.
Yeah. God, I love me some attacking the Power of Juju. But like, yeah, Ratchet and Clank for me during that era was so fresh and was so special, and I think found a way to be unique as a 3D platformer with its shooting elements and with its humor and tone and all that. Like it just hit different than all the other ones, and so yeah, I think that's a really good pick for number 7. Janet, before we get to number 6, I want to read some more write-ins from our audience. Of course, Josh writes in and says, Last of Us, God of War 2018, and Journey in that order.
Okay, I was wondering when we'd see Journey pop up, because I knew it wouldn't be either of our lists because we're
haters.
Yeah, we're Journey haters. I keep using the phrase haters, but like that's just funny to me. Yeah, we're Journey haters. But if I wasn't a Journey hater, I think that's like, I don't want to say obvious, like it didn't have like thought put into it or anything, or is it meaningful to people? But that is like a classic response, you know, when you ask people about it, people fuck with Journey.
Barrett shaking his head.
Are you shaking your head because you don't fuck with Journey, or because you do fuck
Barrett
with
loves Journey.
Disappointed in both of you.
You love Journey? I know.
Journey's
Well, like
great.
when you walk really slow in the sand, it was sad. I'm not gonna lie. It was.
You
sad.
float
No, you
very
walk.
slowly
You're
through
like, You're like, do. You don't remember that?
I
And then he
know.
lays down?
I honestly I
Oh,
blocked
was he
out
dead?
Journey because I was probably halfway asleep.
I played
playing
it
that
really
part.
recently is the thing. Anyway, we're not here to like be mean to other people.
Yeah, I love how
should've brought it
Josh
up.
is like, oh yeah, I love Journey. We're just shitting on it.
Well, here's the thing. I'm glad someone brought up Journey though, because I think that's like a very classic response that I'm happy to see represented in the
And I like it too
community.
because it's an indie title, and I feel like there's
Yes.
probably not going to be that much indie representation since we're talking about like a lot of PlayStation exclusive stuff, and so yeah, Journey should get a shout out here, especially for carrying that flag for PlayStation. Jamma writes in and says Metal Gear Solid, God of War 2018, and Final Fantasy 7, and then he says sorry, Clive. And then Jason writes in and says Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Solid, and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Interesting to see Zero Dawn. It's always interesting when people go with the first instead of the most recent.
Yeah, I mean, it's that tough thing of when you are new and fresh to this franchise versus a thing that's doing more. It's the same thing of like how much. Well, do I make a Nintendo reference on this PlayStation show? Sure, why not? It's the same way as like my first time playing Breath of the Wild was so fucking special because I'd never experienced that before, right? But then it's like, oh, but Tears of the Kingdom adds on so much more that it's hard to not make the argument that Tears is better. But Breath of the Wild did it first, and so like there's that weird double standard thing.
I think there's also like a interesting like nostalgia that ends up coming from the first of anything, because it does feel like, again, besides the freshness, sometimes not to say that all first entries are inherently more simplistic than their you know, not predecessor, but
Successor?
What's the one after
Successor?
Successor, thank you. They're not necessarily less complicated than their successor, but oftentimes they are. I mean,
that's the Last of Us, Last of Us Part 2 argument for me.
And like there's something nice about like a more like tight presentation of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think Zero Dawn is a little bit like that in some ways, like especially the narrative is like way different than.
Yeah, for me it is case by case because God of War Ragnarok. Obviously, I put God of War Ragnarok on my list over God of War, but I'm down to hear the opposite argument because I think for God of War I can understand the idea of this is a straightforward journey where you are spreading the ashes of Kratos's partner, Atreus' mom, right, across the world. I forgot their relationship.
Whose ashes do I have here?
Whose ashes are those? Were they married? Were they just? Who are they?
They were married, right?
They were married. Yeah,
that's his wife, right? My wife, but that's his wife.
It was Atreus' mom.
Classic Kratos line. My wife.
My wife.
Yeah, my wife.
Is Kratos the type to get married? Do they get married in the?
That was his.
In
right?
Greek
that was
mythology.
His wife. I feel like I'm tripping now. I feel like that's his wife.
Look it up because I even as I said it.
No. Because I feel like he's talked to like Brock and Sindri and been like, "That was my wife's." Like,
did he say wife or did he say baby mama?
Yeah, classic Kratos. Anyway,
Janet, I want to tell you about my number 6, but before I tell you about that, I want to tell the world about patreon.com/kindoffunnygames. Over on patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, you can go and get the show ad free. And speaking of ads, let us tell you about our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal Honey, the easy way to save when shopping on your iPhone or computer. Did you know it only takes a few seconds to get it? That means if you go to add it to your laptop or iPhone right now, you could be done before this ad read is even over. And you know what else works fast? Honey's deal finding abilities. Honey is the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it finds to your cart. When you check out, the Honey button appears. All you have to do is click apply coupons. You wait a few seconds as Honey searches for coupons it can find for that. And then if it finds a working coupon, you will find the prices drop. We've saved thousands of dollars thanks to Honey, buying costumes, props, tech over the years. Honestly, not using Honey is just silly. Honey doesn't just work on desktop, it works on your iPhone too. Just activate it on Safari, on your phone, and you get to save on the go. Getting Honey seriously only takes a few seconds, and by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this show. You can get PayPal Honey for free at joinhoney.com/kindafunny. That's joinhoney.com/kindafunny. This episode's brought to you by Shady Rays. Take on the sun with gear built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered for the warm weather ahead with premium polarized shades at an affordable price. Durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures, just like Mike likes them. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair, even on day one, they told us they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. And every purchase supports the Shady Rays Impact Program, which works directly with nonprofits and their communities to empower and make adventure accessible for all walks of life, from childhood cancer patients to young adults with serious health conditions. Exclusively for y'all listening right now, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Go to shadyrays.com and use code KINDAFUNNY for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. Again, that's shadyrays.com. Use code KINDAFUNNY. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. We all know life can be hard. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. I know from experience how often it just seems easier to care about others and keep it moving. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched thin and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. Some of my best friends use BetterHelp and love how helpful it can be for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapist anytime for no additional charge. For more balance with BetterHelp, visit betterhelp.com/kindafunny today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/kindafunny. BetterHelp.com/kindafunny.
And we're back. And my number 6 is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Of course, it was a bit lower on your list, but of course it has to be on my list because Final Fantasy VII Remake was the one that made me fall in love with Final Fantasy VII. And it made me understand what people got out of this game, right? For the longest time, I would hear my friends growing up talking about Final Fantasy VII and how cool it was. And 7 Remake was the thing that made me go, oh, this is fucking cool. This is dope as hell. And yeah, like it totally worked on me. I love the stories. I love the characters, everything I said before about Barrett and what he brought to the table, along with like Aerith and Tifa and everybody else in this game, not to mention Jesse. Like this cast is stacked. The soundtrack is stacked. And yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake for me is a special video game. Janet?
Yeah.
What's your number 6?
In that as well. Shout out. Everyone's hair is really nice in that game. My number 6, I feel like this shows like who I am as a player in general. Little Big Planet 2. Again, when you think PlayStation, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Little Big Planet.
I love this list so far.
I'm having some fun. See, for a long time, all I really did in games was jump, and I was happy to do so. Sometimes I jumped with a gun, sometimes I jumped with whatever freaking grapple rope they have here in the trailer. Yeah, this was, again, kind of thinking of hitting your stride a little bit more. I do think 2 is a bit more refined than 1, and also a little more forgiving than 1. There's like hella content in this game, so much creativity. I think 2, something that Little Big Planet sort of represents to me with PlayStation is not just like the history with the platformer genre, but it's also this great marriage between platforming, multiplayer, and also weird PlayStation. Not that Little Big Planet is like the most like weird idea ever, but it is that media molecule energy of like
quirky.
Creativity. Yeah, it's funky. It's charming. I feel like this was also, I don't want to say like before like cosmetics really took off, because that's not necessarily true, but one of the big things was like the customizations and dressing up, and like it had like this, when you playing Little Big Planet, it really genuinely did feel like you were engaging with a fantastical toy box, but in a virtual space.
Yeah.
And there's something like so cool and cute and quaint, and they had also all this amazing music as well. Matthew in the Trogs chat mentions like the music rocks as well. Yeah, like I still listen to I listen to Cafe Tacuba a lot, and whenever I play them,
Wait, listen to who?
Cafe Tacuba. It's spelled TACV.
Okay.
BA. It's like a Latin American like rock band.
Oh,
Hopefully
yeah.
I'm not butchering their genre. But like I'll listen to their MTV Unplugged special a lot. And
I thought that was like from the soundtrack of Little Big Planet. I was like, dude, I did not. Wait, it is?
So they have a song, I forgot which song, chat might remember. They have a song that I play all the time, and whenever I play it, Isaiah's like, that's the Little Big Planet song. And I'm like, that's fun. And I forget if that song is in 2 or 3 or, so forgive me if I'm attributing it to the wrong entry, but they had so much of that. Weave so naturally. Anyway,
that's awesome.
I'll kind of end it there, but Little Big Planet 2 is just like one of the best games ever. And I feel like I think PlayStation, this is like core PlayStation memory and also quality title.
Yeah. I somehow missed out on the Little Big Planet craze on PS3.
Oh my God.
Like,
and then you played Sackboy by yourself. Like, that's so sad, blessing.
Yeah, I know. But like I had it on PS3. I think I just didn't get into it. And I don't know why. Like, I wanted it so badly for PS3, and I think the PlayStation network outage happened, and then I think they offered it for free for some time, and I got it.
The thing too is like, because like with Little Big Planet 3, for instance, like I actually didn't play that one because something about like,
well, like I feel like that one kind of flew under the radar a bit.
The energy wasn't the same anymore. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what it was, but like it just didn't hit like that. Like something about like they had to have a little gimmick of like there's like the tall one, and then you could do certain things like. And that's why like two was where like everything was hitting. Like it wasn't weirdly as difficult as the first one, but it was still a lot of fun. Yeah.
Going back to some of the audience write-ins, Tim writes in. Is it our Tim? Who knows?
Maybe.
They write in and say Uncharted 4, Spider-Man, and Infamous. Which honestly, that could be our Tim, because I know Tim likes Uncharted 4 and Spider-Man. I don't know about Infamous.
I don't think he's an Infamous guy though, so that might not be our Tim.
That might not. Maybe he wrote that in to confuse us.
Oh yeah, throw us off.
Yeah.
Throw you off the trail. I need to play Infamous still. Also, the song was
Infamous is dope.
Volver a comenzar. Says my dog Nick 96.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Infamous 2 is dope. I played 2 before 1, and I think that was a mistake because I'm trying to go back to 1 and I wasn't feeling it as much. But also, I think my favorite Infamous probably is, weirdly enough, Infamous First Light, which was the like spin-off game from Infamous 1 where you played as Fetch and you're using her neon powers, and I had such a fun time with that one. And they had like a combat horde mode thing in there too. That was really fun. Yvette writes in and says Last of Us 1, Battlefront 2015 for nostalgic reasons, and Monster Hunter World, which is a really cool list. And then Darian Williams writes in and says Ape Escape, Sly 3, Honor Among Thieves, and The Last of Us Part 2. I
like
appreciate
Escape,
how much
right?
variety we got here. My number 5. Sorry, I was doing the thing. I was trying to do like the thing where I strike through the right, and I was like, oh, fuck.
No. It's just like, it was funny because I was like, you like the Ape Escape, right? And then there's like a dramatic pause, and I'm like,
Oh, I did
maybe that
not. I
wasn't
did not
you.
hear the Ape Escape
No, I
thing.
figured you didn't, and then I was like, what the? Okay, anyway. But was that
Gotcha.
you, or am I mixing up with someone
That
else?
liked Ape
You
Escape?
were like down for Ape
I
Escape.
played Ape
yeah?
Escape once when it came to PS Plus.
Right. And you were like down for it.
Yeah, no.
right?
When I
You were, like,
played it that
down.
one time, I was fucking into it. I
yeah.
really liked it. Yeah, Ape Escape is really cool. I didn't play it back in the day, but
Sure.
if you gave me a reason to play through all of Ape Escape now, I'll do it.
You should. No time like the present. I love a game that I wasn't as taken by Ape Escape when I also played it in the same deal, like the PS Plus stuff. But I see the vision. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I feel like if it's something you have fun with, like hell yeah, that's gonna be a great time.
Janet, my number 5 is Bloodborne. Bloodborne,
Okay.
of course, from Software. It is the only game that I guess not the only, because Demon Souls exists too. But like, I think when you're talking about PlayStation associated / exclusive from Software games, you're talking about Bloodborne for like the one that really broke through and brought something cool. And for me, Bloodborne is up there as one of my favorite / one of the best action adventure games for what it brings to the table in terms of world and like how well it defines that like gothic cosmic horror vibe that it brings through. Everything in Bloodborne is disgusting and wet and scary, and I have so much fear for every fucking creature in this game. From Software went ham when they were doing all like the character models and designs in this game, because like I come across any new enemy and I am fucking terrified of whatever I'm about to fight. But yeah, there's that. There's the combat system that's really fun and inspired. I fell in love pretty quickly with the like your secondary weapon that can work as a parry. Like you use your blunderbuss like shotgun to get a parry in, and that's such a unique function, but also it works so well, especially having that like half second that you have to wait to get that gun off, and so you're timing your parries in this really unique way that is really satisfying to get off. You have these boss battles that are some of the most fun boss battles I've ever had in a video game. I will forever remember my encounter with the Orphan of Kaz, and like actually plenty of the bosses, right? Lady Maria, the Father Gascoigne, like so many moments of this game stick out to me as, wow, like that was a battle, and I am so happy to have gotten to the other side of it. It's such a satisfying game to play through. But yeah, also the story and what it does with the world building is really cool, really fascinating, really dark, but also very nerdy in terms of how it translates that HP Lovecraft stuff and turns it into like video game mechanics. Things like your what's it called? Not vision. It's there's like this idea in like HP Lovecraft of like being so aware that now you're seeing things that you couldn't perceive before, right? And they have that as a mechanic in this game, and that was always something that I thought was really cool and a really interesting mechanic to have in a video game that way. But yeah, shout out to Bloodborne.
Hell yeah.
Janet, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is Jack and Daxter. You know, I had to put someone.
I was waiting for it.
You had a feeling it was coming, and now it's here. You know, Jack and Daxter. Genuinely, because I don't want people to assume that, oh, I just love it, so I'm just gonna put it near the top. Genuinely, it is an incredible video game. It is very good. If you like platformers, you will like this game. If you like platformers and have not played this game, you need to. There are very few caveats I really need to give this, other than also chat saying it's Insight.
Insight. It is Insight. It was what I was talking about.
Other than a couple difficulty spikes with like I get lost as hell in the spider cave despite playing this game for the last like 10 to 20 years. But yeah, it's just, I think it nails the formula really well while having its own personality and having its own things to say. I think the reason I rank this so highly compared to all the other platformers in the list is I think it sort of has the perfect kind of trifecta combination of incredible mechanics and incredible world building with also like that X factor of just heart. There's so much like personality and distinction in the biomes, despite the fact that you can obviously like attribute it to many game tropes that you see, like being on a beach and all these other things. But somehow it finds a way to make it its own. I think it totally nails the collectathon kind of formula. Finding the stuff is satisfying. The ask is never too high. It plays with having additional mechanics in a way that I think you saw kind of a lot of, if you think again, the Ratchet foil comparison, Ratchet kind of gets that within the guns, but like to have this kind of innately in the abilities with the eco is interesting without also changing the gameplay too heavily, which is in contrast with like the second game where it goes more gun heavy. So the guns are a lot more distinctive. So it sort of floats between all these spaces in a way that I think is really masterful and memorable at the same time. There's also some incredible bursts of power within this game, specifically with the blue eco where you go really fast. Like there's stuff that is just, you do it and it's almost like a lighthearted power fantasy. It's a lighthearted take on power fantasy a lot of times in this game. So it's why I keep talking about it for a cajillion years over. And yeah, like it remains good. I replay it really often and I have a good time every single time.
Hell yeah. I love how platformer heavy your list is, because we've seen Astrobot, we've seen Ratchet, we've seen Little Big Planet, now we've seen Jak and Daxter. And I feel like we don't think about PlayStation's platformers as being the forefront. Usually we associate platformers with a Nintendo or with with like a Rare or other companies. But yeah, like, I mean, having four of the listings in your list be these platforming franchise, I think speaks very loudly to how good PlayStation platformers have been throughout the generations. And so shout out to that. Going back to audience write-ins, Joven G writes in and says, Spider-Man 2018 / Miles Morales, God of War 2018, and Ghost of Tsushima. And if we can talk about games that used to be exclusive but no longer are, I would definitely include Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2. And then G Rowan 7X writes in and says, Bloodborne, The Last of Us, and Persona 5 Royal. And then Blair,
I was waiting for 5 to pop up.
Persona 5 Royal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have we not seen? Were other people? Yeah, I guess we hadn't heard that yet. Which surprises me. I feel
not enough nerds.
Not enough nerds in here. Just people that like Bloodborne.
Not enough weebs hanging out in our audience, plus.
And then Blair writes in and says, Bloodborne, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, and Ghost of Tsushima. And let me tell you, Blair, you are speaking to my heart right now. God bless you.
Also, the person who wrote in Spider-Man 2018 / Miles Morales, don't be a coward. Pick one.
Yeah, pick one.
That's
pick one.
True, yeah.
Pick one.
That's
They're
like,
two different games.
That's like Last of Us 2. Like that's just
That's be like
different games.
Uncharted 4 / Lost Legacy. No, pick one.
Yeah, no. Choose a video game. My number 4, Shadow of the Colossus.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah, no, I'm a big Shadow of the Colossus person. I play this game. I replay this game all the time. And
this is your Jak and Daxter.
This is my, yeah, exactly. This is my Jak and Daxter. I think for me, half of it is just the nostalgia of playing this game. I tell a story all the time about the week where my friend Addison growing up let me borrow Metal Gear Solid 3 and Shadow of the Colossus in the same week, and I played them back to back. And Metal Gear Solid 3 was such a special one of, man, I didn't know stories and video games could be like this. And then I played Shadow of the Colossus and went, man, video games can actually be art. Like, this is actually a very beautifully created, beautifully crafted thing. And I was so young having that realization. But Shadow of the Colossus for me helped me turn the corner of thinking about video games in a deeper way. I think the amount of Shadow of the Colossus that can be interpreted how you want, and the amount that you can take away from Shadow of the Colossus just by like putting yourself into it, if that makes sense, on just like a level of, this is what this means to me. This is what I think is happening with who these colossi are. This is what I think this thing translates to. Like, that is such a Shadow Colossus leaves so much room open for that kind of interpretation, which I think is powerful. And this kind of video game, especially coming out on the PS2 back in the day, for me, that was such a moment, right? That was my first encounter with something that was like a journey, or like even a Stray, right? Like a game that had something to say and something artistic to bring to the medium. So it's special for me for that. But then also just the soundtrack and the visuals and the bigger than life colossi, all of this came together to make an experience that for me, I'll never forget. It's almost like a video game parable for me of like Shadow of Colossus being this tale that is so simple, but also like it's infinitely replayable. I think that's why it was also such a good option to remake for Blue Point, because it is, hey, you just go around, you fight these 16 big creatures, and it's simple, dude. It's an easy tale, but one that holds a lot of power. And so, yeah, Shadow Colossus holds it down. It's my number 4.
Nice.
Shannon, what you got for me?
Number 4? This is where I put Marvel Spider-Man 2018, which I'm
Hell
like,
yeah.
is it too high? But then I had to, and this is kind of where we go back and forth all the time. You already said a lot about this game, so I'll kind of, I think, speak more towards where do we rank it, right? It's like such a phenomenal video game. And for me, it was one of those things where, while I think the way I talk about it a lot doesn't seem like I hold it in that high of esteem, when I look at the other games on the list, I'm like, I feel like this is one of the better video games on this list. And for all the reasons you said, right? It has this like wonderful combination of open world with also familiar story and also a lot of heart. And I think that's something worth noting about that is a story like a Spider-Man story we've seen a lot of times in a lot of different mediums, right? Even if you're not the biggest comic book superhero nerd ever, chances are you're very still familiar with Spider-Man. I mean, the Spider-Man IP is incredibly powerful. We have a Squishmallow at home that's shaped like Spider-Man, and we have a Comfy that's designed like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is everywhere I go, I see him, you know? Like that's which I know that's him referring to Iron Man, but y'all get what I mean, the vibes, right? There's a lot of power there, but with that, and not the fucking great responsibility line, but with that power comes the pressure to how are you going to be different? How are you going to stand out and tell the story in a unique way? And I think despite me having this, you know, fairly ancillary knowledge of Spider-Man, I still felt it when he had that conversation with his aunt.
Yeah.
You know,
oh my
despite knowing everything, I still felt it. And I think there's so much to be said for that. And also, even though we've talked about the fucking swinging a million times over, like a fucking game where you don't want to fast travel because it's so fucking fun to travel, that is so hard to pull off.
Yeah.
And they did it, and it's great every time. And I'm looking forward to the next one. But yeah, oddly enough, maybe it's because my games were in a sense a little bit weaker in some ways. But I had to, when I looked at them, I'm like, I think of the games, this would be the better video game.
You just say it all
I don't know.
PlayStation games. You can say it. Listen, if you say it, I'll follow. I'm right there with you. These games fucking
But
suck.
I was surprised with how high I ranked it because I'm like, you know, I do think like this versus like Up Your Arse. I'm like, I probably would still go Spider-Man 2018. So you're right there, Insomniac. You're so close.
Yeah. I'm surprised you're going
So
this over
close.
Miles Morales.
Yeah, I do pick this over Miles Morales. I think Miles is definitely cleaner and more dynamic in the mechanics. But this had just a little bit more heart for me. Like the stories hit harder. I think again, if Miles was as much as I don't think it's a one-to-one of like longer game better because more. Like I think that's a very like a gross oversimplification. But I think in this case, I did find myself not quite hitting those same things. Like it's cleaner, but with the lack of mess, it also lost some of the good stuff.
I agree. I didn't have that like that Doc Ock moment or the Aunt May moment in Miles Morales like I had in 2018.
But you didn't have the MJ stealth moment either, and that's the
yeah,
trade-off,
that's the thing.
right?
Yeah, I didn't have those dumb science puzzles things, even though I kind of liked them a little bit. But
Well, you had the didn't he have something with a drone or something? I don't know. He had some things. Maybe they weren't mandatory, but you know, I think the next game is gonna like fucking knock it out of the park though for that reason, because I think it'll marry the dynamic mechanics of Miles Morales with the powerful storytelling of the first one and make one good ass video game.
Hell yeah. I got one audience write in here from Jake Bakes Cakes. I've been going through these in 3 writer increments. Jake Bakes Cakes writes in with a longer one, and so I just want to do this one. He says, "Hope y'all's week has been excellent. This is a PlayStation show, so I'm answering with exclusives. Otherwise, it just felt like answering my 3 favorite games of all time, sans Nintendo. My top 3 PlayStation games: Kingdom Hearts, Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, and Jak and Daxter: The Precursor's Legacy. Honorable mentions: Sly Cooper 2, Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time, and Last of Us Part 2. Thanks for all you do, and can't wait to hear Blessing talk about Bloodborne and Shadow of the Colossus, and Janet talk about Horizon Zero Dawn and Jak and Daxter."
Yeah, but that's pretty close. You guys could do the show yourselves in your head if you needed to. Hopefully, it hasn't come to that. But
I'm sure somebody has.
I love the inclusion of Spyro. I will admit that I went back to replay Spyro, and
it was
wasn't
terrible.
It wasn't quite what I remembered. I have to be honest.
Which Spyro?
Oh God.
Because Spyro 3, I feel like holds up a bit.
Ripto's Rage. That's Ripto's Rage, right?
Oh no, I'm
Ripto's
thinking
Rage.
of Year of the Dragon.
Oh.
So I don't know if people are standing Year of the Dragon like I am.
I think I was replaying the first one. I'm sure it's probably through like the PlayStation collection or whatever. But I will say, like, even with me being kind of like, this wasn't as fun as I remember it being, I still just really loved it. There's something so like creative about it being like this little dragon, and like the way he moves is very unique. I know Neens, Spyro. I know Neens. I was playing and I was like, Neens, I'm not gonna tell you this. Neens loves Spyro in the chat. That's like the favorite franchise ever. But even with that, I still wanted to play it still because I think it's so charming. I'm like, I don't even need this to hit as much as it did before. Like, I still want to go back.
Yeah. Janet, we're down to both of our top 3s. For the sake of time, and I feel like to make this a bit more epic and have that build up, right? I want to do our top 3 all in one go, right? So I'm going to do my 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to have you do your 3, 2, 1. That way we're not keeping Barry here until 6 o'clock.
For sure.
So my number 3 is Persona 5 Royal. A game that was actually
There
kind
it
of
is.
tough for me on this list because I said I was doing one per franchise, and it was between this and Persona 4 Golden. And I've always talked about Persona 4 Golden being my favorite Persona game, and that out of the two that I played, right? But like that comes down to the moments that I had of Persona 4 Golden, of me moving to Seattle and being a new Seattleite and not really knowing anybody or having friends, and playing this game every day on the bus on my way to work and from work on my Vita. That was such a special moment for me playing this game. A game, talking about Persona 4, right? A game where I was making friends in the game, and like having these like developing moments and really feeling like I'm building a community in a video game. Persona 5 Royal, I've decided to go with just on like if I'm removing that like nostalgia out of it, if I'm removing that moment out of it, Persona 5 Royal, I think, is beat for beat probably just a better video game, right? Like, I think there's a little bit of preference for me for the characters of Persona 4 Golden, but when you're talking about the art style, when you're talking about the soundtrack, when you're talking about the mechanics, when you're talking about just how addicting this 120-hour RPG is, and when you're talking about some of these story moments of the characters added in Royal and where they go toward the end of the game, oh my God, does Persona 5 Royal hit so hard for me. And it is a game that after like every few years now, you know, we make fun of Barrett sometimes for replaying video games, especially Persona 5 because it's so long. But every few years where I get a bit removed from Persona 5, I get this hunger to
You
go
just
back.
want to go home, Bless.
I want to go home,
Yeah.
Barrett. It's like that is the thing. It feels like going home. It feels
It's
like returning to
comfort
something
food,
comfortable.
man.
Yeah, it's returning to a place comfortable. I like just a few weeks ago, I booted up Persona 5 Strikers just to like get a little bit of that hit again. And so yeah, that's my number 3. My number 2 is The Last of Us. The Last of Us again is just it was such a special moment, and for me, yeah, it is like it's the video game itself, right? It's what they do with story, what they do with gameplay, how Naughty Dog really found something here with balancing a great heartwarming and also very dark story about like a dude who lost somebody, who found somebody else and was able to kind of re-find his humanity in them. I thought the way they
And then
explored
lose
Joel
the humanity again.
and then lose their humanity again, but the way they were able to use Joel and Ellie to really like dig into what the kind of story you can tell in an apocalypse and really succeed in that and make me really care about these characters, for me was phenomenal. But on top of that, I'm somebody who I like the Uncharted games, but I always had like these things here and there with gameplay where I'm like, I'm not always loving the climbing. I'm usually not liking the shooting. Last of Us, I fucking adore the gameplay. I think the gameplay is actually really great in Last of Us. I know some people might dispute that, but I think what they do with stealth here, what they do with the crunchiness of how melee feels and how like tense the shooting feels, especially with having limited ammo, I think it's so well done. And so, yeah, Last of Us for me is, and having played Last of Us Part 1 now, and even watching the TV show, Last of Us is just something I fucking love. I've just given it up. I just fucking love The Last of Us 1. All right, it's a fucking fantastic game that I think about all the time. And so that's my number 2. But my number 1 is Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid, at this point, one of my favorite video game franchises. 3 is my favorite one. And going back to that story of my friend that let me borrow Shadow of the Colossus and Metal Gear Solid 3, right? Shadow of the Colossus opened my eyes to video games being art. Metal Gear Solid 3 opened my eyes to, wow, this story is incredible. These characters are incredible. I care about the relationship between Naked Snake and the boss, right? And like I care about that dynamic. I care about the cast of villains. The boss fight with the end is one of the best boss fights I've ever experienced in my life. And moment to moment, the cutscene action, fucking amazing. The dialogue, fucking engaging. Like there's so much to get right in Metal Gear Solid 3, and on an emotional level, it's probably the game that I'm emotionally attached to the most because I fucking love these characters. But even replaying it with Barrett, a year or two ago at this point,
Almost 2 years ago.
almost
dude.
2 years ago, which is fucking wild.
I know.
It's a story that I can't get enough of. Even re-experiencing it, it does so much right, and like I think it really does such a good job of making you excuse me, identify with Snake and identify with what's going on in the moment-to-moment situation of this game. And yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3, one of my favorite games of all time, and for sure my favorite PlayStation game of all time. And so that is my list. Janet,
Hell yeah.
what's your top 3?
Number 3, I got Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty.
Whoa.
Is it better or worse than 3? I don't know, because it's been a million years since I've played them. I'll tell you when I replay them. But the reason I picked 2 is because it is the one that sits as most heavily in my mind. I have the most nostalgia for it. It was for me the pinnacle of my wow moments on PlayStation were playing Metal Gear Solid 2. From that again, I tell the story all the time, seeing that opening cutscene, walking on the bridge, it raining, a Hideo Kojima production. I was like, oh shit, like it's about to go down, even though I was like fucking like 8 or 10, so I probably didn't say any of those things. But in my heart, that's what my heart felt. I had so much fun fucking playing this. It is weirdly like cozy to me in its pacing and its slow stealth and its like lightly spraying the stuff to like make sure the bombs don't go off, in dragging people slowly to the lockers. I have a moment in this where I shot a guy, and usually they just fall forward because it's like the simplest way to kind of create that animation. But one time they fell backwards over the railing and screamed on the way down, and I was blown by the thought and the possibility. Like, I didn't think that could happen in a game. Again, this is a long time ago. Everything about this was just a joy to play and experience and sort of puzzle your way through. And that's why it is my number 3 game. I love the hell out of this game. And I really want to do a front to back because I've never played 1. And I didn't play the more modern ones, like fucking, what was it, like 5, right?
Yeah.
Like Phantom Pain. So I'd love to do a front to back.
You said you haven't played 1 or 5?
Correct.
Oh, dude. Yeah, we got to get you to play 1.
I don't really know about 4 either. I definitely played 2 and 3 because I remember like Snake Eater like fucking hits as well, like, which I'm glad to see.
5 has excellent gameplay. I think you'd be into 5.
Yeah, like I'm excited to, but I don't know when to make that time for it. But anyway, until I can make the time for it, let's talk about my number 2 pick, which is God of War Ragnarok. This game fucking hits. You already talked about it a bit, so I won't spend too much time on it. Again, kind of a known quantity. We've done a lot of content on it very recently because it just came out not too long ago. I picked 2 over 1 just because I think I like the messiness of 2. A little bit of a theme in this upper end of the list. It's got drama. It has more players kind of involved in terms of even though it's the same cast, like you're in a different spot with the characters, so the action kind of sits differently. There's a lot of like really beautiful vistas in this. You get to, now that Atreus has grown up a little bit more, he's also like grown as a character as well, and you kind of get to experience not just, before it was Kratos' journey, like 1 feels like Kratos' 2018, right? Kratos' journey, and he has Atreus with him. This feels like Kratos and Atreus' journey featuring sometimes just Kratos' journey in a sense, and sometimes just Atreus. You kind of see both of these like different angles. While before it was like Kratos is trying to get shit done, and Atreus is like, I don't know if I want to, While here it's like they have their own like motives and desires and secrets and personalities.
I talked about how much I hated Atreus in 2018. I really dug Atreus in this one.
Yeah, it's just, he's a little bit older, so it's a little easier to relate, I think, too. But it was just a fun as fuck game. Like, what an amazing, playing God of War Ragnarok, honestly, it felt like, it really did feel like an epic in the traditional sense. It's like fucking playing like the best graphic novel ever. Loved it. And number 1, of course, surprisingly no one, Last of Us Part 2. Same deal as you, right? Big Last of Us fan. Again, pick 2 over 1 just because I think they go for more. I think everything about it is better. The only thing that isn't better is how I feel mentally and emotionally while playing it. Again, 1 is so much shorter. I know it's so much better. It's a little bit easier to like, we're replaying and we're having fun. And like, sure, it's dark, but it's okay. While 2 is like, it's like reading the fucking Odyssey. It's like, this is a workout. It's 600 pages deep, and I don't know when we're fucking getting out of water here. But I think it's telling a really beautiful and more interesting story than 1. I think mechanically it really builds on a lot of the elements of 1 to allow for more interesting and dynamic gameplay. I felt a lot more mechanically challenged in 2 than I did in 1, in a good way. And I also felt like I was more capable because of the tool set that they gave you. There's a lot of also really incredible striking images and shots in this game as well. The shot of Ellie engulfed in red light and blood is like,
oh my God,
fucking
it's
incredible.
Dark, man.
Yes, like, and I love the dark shit too. So that's the thing. And Last of Us has never been a cheery franchise, but 2 is like one of the like, it's so well made and so good, but it is also one of like the worst things to experience in a way. And like I love it so deeply. So
that's my push and pull of like picking 1 or 2.
Yeah.
2 on a technical and gameplay level, I think is above 1, but on a storytelling and like an emotional level, man, like 2 ripped my heart out. I think too much. I think that's where I come down on liking 1 more than 2.
2 is like what I was saying, like on the drive back to like the apartment before the show. I was like, 2 is the best game that I never really want to play again.
Yes, like
And
I
not
think
just,
about it a
like,
lot of time of like, man, when am I going to go back to Last of Us Part 2? And I don't know if I'll ever be in an emotional space to replay Last of Us Part 2.
And I know that might sound like kind of a weird comment because there's a lot of games that I don't replay, but 2 is like a game I genuinely like don't really want to. It's not even just like I haven't gotten around. It's like I don't think I want to do that. It's a lot. I probably will because I want to get the platinum because I do love the game a lot. It's my number 1 game, right? But of this list. But yeah, it is a lot, and I think 1 is a lot easier to re-go through.
It's a lot emotionally and just like scary wise too. Remember how they reworked Stalker's Bless?
Yeah.
I hate Stalkers in Last of Us Part 2. And
Terrifying.
I hate that they brought them back for the remake of Part 1 of like how they work and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, shout out to when that game turns into Resident Evil, which is also just fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like, god damn.
Yeah, it is really scary and again, more challenging mentally, emotionally. The length is also it's way longer, I feel like, or at least feels longer.
Oh, definitely.
So, yeah,
It's way longer for sure.
There's a lot of reasons why it's like that's a lot to go back into.
Yeah.
So,
ladies and gentlemen, those are our top 10 PlayStation games of all time. Thank you everybody for writing in with your write-ins, right? Like there's so many I didn't get to. Curtis here says Bloodborne, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I feel like there's a lot of repeated games here. Neither of us had Uncharted on our list, but a lot of the audience has Uncharted, so we of course got to give the shout out. Maybe Greg will come and do his list at some point. I did this as a, hey, like we're down a person, we can do this without probably doing it for 5 hours straight. But yeah, it'd be cool to hear Greg's, because I'm sure once you get Greg's list, you'll have probably a God of War number 1, I imagine, if not Peace Walker. You'll have that. You'll have an Uncharted or 2, right? I think you'll have more, like an Infamous as well. But hey, if you want that from Greg, tweet at Greg. Patapon, yeah. I was gonna say Loco Roco, but he's not a Loco Roco guy.
no,
right?
that's me. That's me.
You're a Loco Roco person. That's what it is. But yeah, if you want to hear Greg's list, tweet at Greg at GameOverGreggy on Threads and on X. I hate calling it that. I don't like calling it that.
I don't like it either. It's so bad.
Before we get out of here, just a quick shout out to the drop this week. You got F1 Manager on F1 Manager 2023 on PS5 and PS4. You got Venba on PS5, and then also Tren is out right now in Dreams.
Hell yeah.
If you want to go play Media Molecule's new game, Tren, that you can play within Dreams. I know earlier in the week I said I was going to talk about Tekken 8 on the show. We're out of time. I don't have time to talk about no Tekken 8, but maybe I'll talk about it on a future show. We'll see. Maybe on KFG or something. You'll have to tune in to find out. But until then, Janet, thank you so much for joining me on this one-on-one episode of PS Love You XOXO.
Hell yeah.
Is there anything that people should check out that you're working on?
Oh, well, not necessarily. I'll say go to my twitch.tv/GameOnasis, and my youtube.com/GameOnasis, even though I'm grossly behind on uploading my VODs, which are all demonetized because they have Disney stuff in them. But yeah, I'm doing that Kingdom Hearts playthrough. I'm also, back on my best of grind as well. So cool things to check out. Yeah. And I'll be talking about that throughout the couple weeks as I filter out like games that came out not a million years ago.
Hell yeah. Remember, this has been PS I Love You XOXO, your weekly PlayStation podcast that you can watch live on patreon.com/kindafunny, just like so many people are, or later on podcast services around the globe. Until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.